And a U.S. official told ABC News that a person is in custody and multiple people have been wounded. We are working to learn more information, whether we can confirm an exact number of how many people were impacted by this active shooter at Fort Stewart. But again, all of this started at around 11 this morning. Full base on lockdown, schools on lockdown as a result of this incident. We did hear from Liberty County schools. They're under a soft lockdown. The school district said out of an abundance of caution, 3 schools are on a soft lockdown: Button Gwinnett Elementary, Joseph Martin Elementary, and Snelson Golden Middle School. The district said they are working closely with law enforcement to ensure that the safety of students and staff is prioritized. They're going to provide updates as more information becomes available. But again, in our live shot with Andy just a few minutes ago, we actually, when we first checked in with him at around, I would say 11:30, we saw really no movement at the gates of Fort Stewart. But now suddenly we are starting to see cars coming in and out. So we're working to learn whether the lockdown has been lifted. But as ABC News is reporting, they were told by a U.S. official that a suspect is in custody. We are working to hear from Fort Stewart themselves to see whether that is the case. Obviously, we don't know quite yet if this was just one active shooter, if there were multiple. I would assume it was probably just one, because that is what they said originally. They just said active shooter, singular. But they did report multiple casualties as a result of this incident. We want to turn back now to that 911 call. If you are just joining us, this is what happened at around 11 this morning. This is what we heard.
Mag Station 1, mutual aid request for a gunshot wound on Fort Stewart. It'll be building 8422nd Brigade, 8422nd Brigade, gunshot wound, mutual aid.
They have armed artillery there at that.
Mag Station 1, mutual aid request for a gunshot wound on Fort Stewart. It'll be building 8422nd Brigade, 8422nd Brigade, gunshot wound, mutual aid.
Ken, you were just listening to the 911 audio from around 11 this morning. You can hear in that call, they originally said gunshot wound. We are now hearing there are multiple people who are wounded. We're working to learn more information. It looks like we just got an update, working to see if we can confirm this, but this just came into our newsroom email. It says 5 soldiers were shot today in an active shooter incident in the 2nd Armored Brigade combat team area. All soldiers treated on site moved to the community hospital. They're saying no active threat to the community. Law enforcement was dispatched for a possible shooting in the 2nd Armored Brigade combat team complex at 10:56 a.m. The shooter was apprehended at 11:35 a.m. The installation was locked down at 11:04 a.m. and Fort Stewart lifted the lockdown of the main containment area at 12:10 p.m. The 2nd Armored Brigade combat team complex still locked down at this time. Emergency medical personnel were dispatched to treat the wounded soldiers at 11:09 a.m. Again, this incident, they're saying, remains under investigation. They said no additional information will be released until the investigation is complete. So that is an update that we just received from Fort Stewart. So that is the confirmed information that we now have. 5 soldiers shot in an active shooter situation. Again, this happened in the 2nd Armored Brigade combat team area. All soldiers treated on site and moved to Wynn Army Community Hospital for further treatment. We did hear that some were being brought to Memorial Health in Savannah, so we're working to learn whether, maybe get some clarity on that. But this is saying that they were treated at the Wynn Army Community Hospital. They said there is no active threat to the community at this point. Again, law enforcement dispatched for a possible shooting at 10:56 this morning, but it wasn't until around 11:04 that the lockdown occurred. We want to go back to that statement now from Governor Brian Kemp. He said, as we remain in close contact with law enforcement, Marty, the girls, and I are saddened by the tragedy at Fort Stewart. We're keeping the families, their victims, and all those who answer the call to serve in our hearts and prayers. And we ask that Georgians everywhere do the same. Now, again, Fort Stewart said it lifted the lockdown of the main containment area at 12:10 p.m., but the 2nd Armored Brigade combat team complex is still locked down at this point. And emergency medical personnel were dispatched to treat the wounded soldiers at 11:09 a.m. We want to read you the in. Here's what it says. It says 5 soldiers were shot today in an active shooter incident in the 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team area. All soldiers were treated on site and moved to Wynn Army Community Hospital for further treatment. There is no active threat to the community. Law enforcement was dispatched for a possible shooting in the 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team complex at 10:56 a.m. The shooter was apprehended at 11:35 a.m. The installation was locked down at 11:04 a.m. and Fort Stewart lifted the lockdown at the main containment area at 12:10 p.m. 2nd Armored Brigade Combat Team complex still locked down. Emergency medical personnel were dispatched to treat the wounded soldiers at 11:09 a.m. The incident remains under investigation and no additional information will be released until the investigation is complete. So that is the latest update that we have from Fort Stewart. So now they are saying that there is no more active threat. We do know multiple schools, including Liberty County schools, were placed on a soft lockdown as a result of this incident. But Fort Stewart now saying the threat has been contained at this point. 5 soldiers shot. I think a question that we are going to be working to answer is, are those soldiers just wounded? Have they succumbed to their injuries? But if they were just taken to Wynn Army Community Hospital, I feel like that's a good indication that it might just be a wound. Because Memorial Health in Savannah does tend to handle more serious injuries. That's a Trauma 1 center. Of course, we are working to learn. We did initially hear that some soldiers were being taken to Memorial Health in Savannah. So we're working to maybe get some answers on that and make sure that we're providing you all with the most up-to-date information. But again, 5 soldiers shot today as a result of an active shooter. And we heard it on our police scanner at around 11 this morning that there was an active shooter on Fort Stewart. We now know, excuse me, I'm beginning to lose my voice. We now know that the shooter was